Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us today or tonight, depending on where you are, for a special Osteoporosis Canada holiday baking demo webinar. Before we begin today's webinar, Osteoporosis Canada acknowledges the land that our offices, located in Toronto, are on, is the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabeg, the Chippewa, and the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis. We also acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit. My name is Tracie Napoli, and I'm the Director of Fund Development and MARCOM at Osteoporosis Canada, and I will be your baking demo host. This webinar will provide general information about cooking and food knowledge. It's not intended as individualized health or nutrition advice. Now, during the webinar, as always, we would love to hear from you. So if you have a question or a comment related to the webinar, just click the Q&A icon at the bottom of your screen, or you can enter the comments in the chat. We'll do our best to answer as many questions as we can during the webinar within the time available. And we've been talking a lot on our Cook with OC program about the nutrient calculator. Have you started using the nutrient calculator? It's going to tell you if you're getting enough of the 5 nutrients recommended for good bone health: calcium, vitamin D, protein, magnesium, and vitamin K. Now, you can use the tool on the website, on the Osteoporosis Canada website, or you can download the app on the App Store or on Google Play. So today's recipe is a fun one, and we're featuring ingredients that maybe you use every day or you may not use every day. Ingredients like walnuts, dried apricots, dried cranberries, dates, cinnamon, ginger, fancy molasses, and Greek yogurt. So this is laid out here with the nutrient breakdown for each serving. Now, you should read package labeling because depending on the product or the brand, you may have a different serving size. So this is just a really quick view of what nutrients are going to be in the recipe today per serving. But of course, if you have the nutrient calculator, you can go on your own leisure and read up on your own. So today's featured recipe is Fruited Holiday Buns. And per serving, we have 150 milligrams of calcium, 9 grams of protein, 40 milligrams of magnesium, 2.5 micrograms of vitamin K, and just 0.2 micrograms of vitamin D. I'll put the link to the recipe in the chat, but you can find this and other recipes on the website at osteoporosis.ca/recipes. Pardon me. And as always, it's my pleasure to introduce Emily Richards, who's a professional home economist, freelance food writer, chef, and she's the author and co-author of 11 cookbooks. Emily also writes and develops recipes for print and online publication that include everyday cooking and healthy eating, and she can be found on TV, radio, and webcasts just like this one. Hello, Emily.
Hey, Tracie. Hey, everybody. If you can't see me, it's because I'm just around the corner. Here I am.
We did this the
Surprise!
last one. Do you remember? That's how it started the last one.
It's
And
like a big
sorry.
entrance, me turning the corner, and I'm like, I'm
Exactly.
here.
We're zhuzhing it up. And apologies again. I'm just suppressing this little nagging cough. So sorry for that. But Emily, we are a little later than normal tonight.
We are.
We chose a different time. And I think we have a few international guests from like the US, Australia. So we welcome you. And of course, from all across the country. So what are we making?
Fruited holiday buns, Tracie.
Oh, and it's fun. And so here's the thing. We develop these recipes, we focus on, all these different methods and strategies to get you cooking at home, but it's always fun to do a treat and also use ingredients maybe you don't typically use.
I agree. And I think these are things that, so this time of year, there's a lot of baking that's happening. And sometimes, we kind of indulge because it's out there. And this actually has a little bit of purpose, if you will, because we've noted the nutrients in it. And as we use the ingredients, we'll talk a little bit about them. We often get lots of questions about substitution, so we'll talk about those too. But kind of that overarching theme is that we're presenting you the recipe as is, and that's what the nutrients that you will find in the recipe. So as soon as you start playing around with it, things change a little bit. And in this case, Tracie, I noticed that in your opening slide, Greek yogurt was there. So we'll talk
Yes.
about that because I'm using milk today, but Greek yogurt is a great substitute for the milk in the recipe too. So
Yes.
those are things that, it's fabulous to have on hand. And dried fruits are great for baking. And this is something that is perfect for brunch if you're getting together with friends or a breakfast. I'm going to tell you about the make ahead, which is awesome. Or even just an afternoon tea, a get together with friends, because that tends to happen if you have a few days off over the holiday season. And this is you don't have to tell them, by the way, that it's got 150 milligrams of calcium per
You
serving.
just say
That's
it's
just an
delicious.
that's just an added
And that you
bonus.
made it. And you know what? And I do apologize. I may have added in the Greek yogurt by mistake, but because the recipe, I'm not sure if it calls for that. So we're going to check that.
It's okay,
We're gonna
it's all
check-
good. It gives me
Exactly.
something to talk about, Tracie, which is awesome.
Exactly. And you know what? We, as always, we're going to give away an apron. So if you're on at the end of the webinar, I will draw a name and we will send you that. So, oh, and there is a benefit to this recipe. So if you don't have a lot of patience, like some of us, it's not a yeasted dough.
Tracie, she's
It's like,
talking about
yes,
herself.
yes, it's not a yeasted dough. This is going to come together pretty quickly. So, oh, and Emily is the magic of our webinar cook program. She's just checking on something that's already in the oven.
We eventually technology will allow smell to come through our computers. I
Yes.
promise. It's absolutely wonderful. Maybe
All
you're
right.
sitting, maybe
You
you're sitting
go.
at
I'm gonna
home. I
go.
will. I will for sure. Maybe you're sitting at home enjoying a cup of tea, a glass of wine, just relaxing with your laptop. Or your tablet. And thanks for joining us tonight. It is, as Tracie mentioned, a little bit later for us. And I'm still awake. So I'm really happy about that to get this done. And sometimes, you have a little time after dinner. You might want to prepare yourself for the next day or the weekend, and that's where these make aheads will come in into play. So we're going to start off with the flour. No, let's start off with the fruit because there's lots to talk about with the fruit, and it's got some great texture. So these fruited buns, think kind of a biscuit dough is what we're working with here. So that's when Tracie meant that kind of no fuss. We don't have to proof any yeast or anything like that. We're using a chemical leavener tonight. We're using baking powder. So that's going to give us that nice light texture in the biscuit dough that once we get there. But I'm going to start off with our fruit because we have a combination of fruit and nuts here. So I'm going to start off with walnuts, and walnuts are a softer nut. So if you are not a fan of walnuts, but you like pecans, that's a great option here. If you want something a bit crunchier in your fruited bun, you could use something like almonds. Just make sure that they're chopped up because the texture in here is really what makes these extra delicious because as you bite into it, that tender walnut or pecan will be absolutely wonderful. So with that combination, we're adding some dried fruit. So I'm going to add some dried cranberries. And if you didn't have dried cranberries, this could be easily raisins if you had them at home, dried blueberries, currants. If you had some dried apples, you could chop those up and use them here too. So there's lots of great options when it comes to dried fruit. If you're looking for something a little bit more holiday-esque or a little bit sweeter, you could also dive into kind of glacé cherries, mixed fruit, or citrus peel, because that would be a great option in this too. And that would definitely change the flavor a little bit, but it would also maybe bring in a little bit more of a fruitcake feel or a holiday feel if that's what you're looking for. I like these because they're all purpose. They're really kind of year round. We're not kind of focusing on anything that you can just get through the holidays because sometimes mixed peel and citrus peel are a little bit trickier to find in certain areas of the country. So throughout the year. So that's why these are great as a all around recipe. So I'm also going to add some dried apricots that I've chopped up. And if you're having trouble chopping these dried fruits, try scissors. If you have a heavier scissor, that kind of cuts through the dried fruits a little bit easier. If you find that they're really sticking, Dates tend to, which we're also adding, tend to have that consistency where you cut with a knife and it tends to stick to the knife. You can rub your knife with a little oil if you want, and it helps kind of reduce that stickiness. Now I'm using medjool dates. They tend to have that kind of caramelly flavor. They're a little bit softer. If you're looking for them, they're not in the bacon aisle. They're typically in the produce aisle because they're a fresher um, date. I was going to say fig because that's another option here. You could use dried figs in this recipe. I love dried figs, and I just eat them on their own often. So dried figs would be beautiful, or prunes. If you had some prunes, that would be fabulous. So if you're buying medjool dates, you can find them pitted, but most often they will have the pit in there. So just remove the pit and you can dice it up. And another little thing, if you keep them in the refrigerator, when you go to cut them, it is a little bit easier because they do have such freshness to them and they're a little bit soft and sticky. At room temperature, they tend to have that little bit of extra stickiness. So this is a lovely fruit and nut mixture here. We're going to add a little bit of seasoning to it and start bringing in our kind of holiday flavors and I think year-round deliciousness. We're going to add some ground cinnamon, and then we're also going to add some cloves and nutmeg. Okay. Now, if you're thinking, I don't have all these spices, Emily, I just have pumpkin pie spice, use that. I think in total I need 2.5 teaspoons. So it's 2 teaspoons of ground cinnamon and a quarter teaspoon each of the other two. So if you have a spice mix like pumpkin pie spice mix, you could use something like that. Or if you have something that has a little bit of cinnamon, you could also use cardamom here, which would be fabulous, give it a little bit more spiciness. And I love cardamom in so many things, and I interchange it very often with when a recipe calls for cinnamon, because I really do love that flavor. Okay, so what I want to do is just kind of mix this together and coat those spices onto the fruit and nuts. Now, if you're looking at this and thinking, Emily, that's kind of dry, what are we going to do about that? I'm going to give you some options. You don't have to do anything, by the way, because we're putting these inside our fruited buns. So they're going to kind of get a little bit more moist as they bake because of the moisture of the dough itself. But if you like a little holiday cheer, you could add a little bit of vanilla to this if you wanted. You could add some orange liqueur, would be absolutely delicious. If you are using almonds, let's say, you could use some amaretto. Chopped hazelnuts in here would be great with frangelico. So what I'm saying is here, you could really add a splash or two of a little bit of what some would say a toast to the holidays. I wouldn't go more than 2 tablespoons though, because what that will do is add a little too much moisture and then it'll kind of give us a really wet interior for our buns, and we don't want that. Okay, so I'm just going to set that aside because we have that ready to go. And I'm going to get our sugar and butter mixture together. So this is some soft butter that I have, and it needs to be really soft. So as soon as I put my spatula in here, it is very easy to spread. Now in the recipe, what I specifically said was butter, really soft, but not melted, because I want that spreadable mixture to go onto our dough. So if it's melted, it doesn't kind of have the same coverage. Okay. So I have a really nice soft butter. So if your butter is from the refrigerator and it's a little too hard and you just kind of want to move on, use very, very short times on the microwave, or you can use some hot water in a larger bowl, get it nice and steamy, and then cover it over the butter and just let it kind of steam and warm up in there. Now, you could also, if you wanted to, use a little hand mixer and beat it till it's soft. I find that that makes a really big mess and it ends up everywhere. So here, what I'm doing is making sure that all of the sugar gets absorbed into the butter. Okay, so we have this beautiful sugar and butter spread that's going to go on the inside of our buns. Okay, so there we are. And I'm just going to leave my spatula in here because that's going to help me spread it. Now I'm using brown sugar, which is actually golden yellow sugar when you're at the grocery store. If you have dark brown sugar, you can use that in this recipe. It will just have a little bit of a darker color on the inside of your bun. Okay. All right. So far, do we have any questions so far? Because I did two parts of the recipe, and I always like to kind of take apart the recipe. I find it's a little bit easier because sometimes when you look at the recipe, which I have right here, it can look really long. Okay. But what I've done is kind of taken apart the pieces. So we did the fruit filling and we have our butter and sugar mixture. And now we're going to work on the dough. But I wanted to make sure that there weren't any questions, or maybe Tracie wants to add something to our dried fruit conversation.
No, I think you covered it. That was good. That was a good instruction on that. But we do have a question. Somebody asked if they needed to make this dairy free with the butter, what could you do?
That's a great question. So there's a lot of vegan butters that work just as well as solid butter. So same rules apply. I have my godson can't have dairy, so I often look for vegan butter as a replacement and use it the same way as butter. So as long as it's a solid version, I let it soften at room temperature and then work it in as I would regular butter. So that's a great option. And right now, if you are kind of price matching for butter or vegan butter, they're on par typically. So you're not looking at something. Whereas before it was a lot more expensive to use vegan butter, they are similar in price right now. You do get a little bit less depending on the brand that you buy. So that's a great option. For some people, if they are using for the biscuit part, because we're using butter again, you could use something like a vegetable shortening if you wanted to. You could also use a little bit of a neutral oil. You need to use a little bit less because it is a liquid, because it changes the texture of the dough a little bit as well. And you could also use that vegan butter in here to replace it, which is what we're going to work on next. Okay. I just have to check what's in the oven first.
Actually, Emily, while you do that,
Yeah.
we had someone ask, how do you feel about margarine?
How is that a personal question or
I don't
just like a
know.
general?
How do you feel if you were to substitute instead and use margarine?
So as long as you're using a hard margarine as opposed to the soft margarine, it tends to work a little bit better. Just because there's the structure of it helps create and steam as it's baking to kind of give it a little bit more puff and a little bit more flakiness. So same rule applies with, let's say, a neutral oil or a soft margarine, or if the butter was really soft, it doesn't have that same lift. So not that we're saying you have to use a cold butter in this recipe. Room temperature butter is okay. And the reason why I don't specify that it has to be cold, I'm checking just to make sure, is because I didn't specify it, so that's good. Is oftentimes is if you're using your hands and if you have any form of arthritis or if your hands are a little bit stiff, cold butter to break it into dough can
Mhm.
be very hard. So you can also use a food processor for that, which as we go along, we can talk about that too, because that is an option, or a pastry blender. The one reason why I like using my hands to get the butter into the flour is because you can actually feel the size of the butter. Whereas in a food processor, you're kind of guesstimating. You open up the lid and make sure that you're looking kind of to see that the butter's been broken down in equal sized pieces into the flour itself.
And probably if you're using a food processor, you don't want to just turn it on, you want to pulse. So you
Exactly.
have more control over it. There are some comments just about the butter. So the butter is listed in the recipe in more than one spot. So what you'll see is the butter is, and I'm pulling it up now so I don't get it wrong. For the dough, it is cold butter, but for the fruited filling, the butter that's called for is very soft but not melted. So it's
Yes.
important that you follow those instructions so that you get the desired result. But it is different because it comes in more than one spot.
Yes. And so we basically worked on the filling. So our filling is ready. We have the fruit and nut mixture as well as the butter and sugar combination. So when you take a look at the recipe, you'll see that under fruit filling because that's
Mhm.
going inside the dough. Now we're going to work on the dough, which is the first part of the recipe. I know I didn't do it in the order, so I apologize, but I was also trying to work with the space that I have. And once I have the dough, we're going to go right into the filling. and put it on. So logistically, for me to present it to you without it having a big mess, this was the way to go. And that's where our kind of cold butter is coming into play. Our diced butter is the best way to kind of refer to it, if that
Perfect. So I'm
makes
going to give
sense.
you a couple of questions about the filling,
Yes.
and then you're going to move on. So some people, if they have certain nut allergies or they need to switch, so depending on the nut, do they need to be treated differently? So instead of walnuts, pecans are very similar in terms of size and texture, but almonds are a harder nut. So if you were to use that, I mean, can you talk about that a little bit? And
Yeah,
then
for
can
sure.
you also talk about, let's say you want, is a sugar substitute a good idea? We're going to talk about molasses, not now. We're going to talk about molasses after, but I'm going to leave you with those questions. Off you go.
Perfect. Thank you. So I already forgot the questions. No, I didn't. Um, nuts, walnuts, pecans. Yes, you can substitute those directly because they're very similar in texture and softness, right? So and flavor, there's walnut lovers, then there's pecan lovers, and then there's vice versa, right? So whatever works for you. However, there's this whole other nut world of almonds and hazelnuts, for example, that are a bit crunchier and harder. So I would definitely use those in here. But where I've said that the walnuts are chopped, I would chop the almonds and hazelnuts a little bit smaller. Okay. Because if you bite into kind of like half a hazelnut in this bun, because the bun's going to be nice and flaky in your mouth, and then you get this big kind of crunch. So just chop them a little bit more finely and it will still work. Now, nut allergies. What are you going to do? You're going to leave out the nuts? Of course you are. However, it's half a cup of an ingredient in the filling, so you don't want to just not use them. Replace them with more fruit. You could also use things like pumpkin seeds, right? We have a whole vast amount of seeds that you can use. You could use flax seeds in here. You could also use a little bit of sesame seeds or sunflower seeds and have a mix. So that would be quite lovely as well. And you could also use other dried fruit. I know I had mentioned some as I was measuring out the dried fruit and mixing it together, but things like you go tropical on these. You use some dried mango, dried pineapple, and just chop them up again small so that you're mixing everything together. And then add some coconut to it. Wouldn't that be a delicious filling? You could have a tropical fruit and nut or fruit, tropically fruited bun. Just created a whole new recipe, Tracie.
And you know what? I have more questions. We're not going to go just yet because everyone this has so many questions. I love a tropical fruited bun. Dried pineapple, anyone with the
And then
coconut?
like a coconut frosting on top. Oh my gosh.
Who doesn't? We could talk about food all day. I'm telling you, it's delicious. Okay, so this is a this we get so whenever we do a baking webinar, we've done a few, we get this question all the time. Butter, salted or unsalted? What is when we list it in the recipe, because it's not specified, let's talk about that.
Okay, so butter is something that if it's not specified, it's salted butter or unsalted, whatever you have at home. Um, so a lot of pastry recipes, you'll find that unsalted butter is called for because of the other ingredients, or they just want that kind of richness of the butter flavor coming through. In this case, you can use salted butter quite easily. And oftentimes people refer or, when butter is listed and it's not stated unsalted, it's just salted butter that's being used. So salted butter has salt in it, which helps preserve the butter. And so if you don't use butter very often, salted butter might be a great option for you because it does eventually, but it doesn't tend to absorb the flavors in your refrigerator quite as quickly as unsalted butter because unsalted butter doesn't have that, doesn't have the salt in it. So you'll see it discolor a little bit more quickly than salted butter. So if you've had your butter in your fridge for, let's say, 2 months, because you don't use it very often, you pull it out and you start to see it's got that little bit of coating on the outside. It's because it doesn't have anything preserving it. It doesn't have the salt in there, right? So that's what happens to change it. So if you love using unsalted butter, and if you find it on sale, because holiday time, definitely butter goes on sale, just toss it in the freezer and then pull it out. If you know that you only use a little bit at a time, portion it out. 1 pound of butter is 2 cups. So you can cut it into 4 pieces and you have half a cup portions that could be great for some cookies if you're making them. Half cup is a great one because then if you need two for 1 cup for a larger batch, you could do 2 halves and then do the rest in 1/3 cups because then you could make this recipe because we're using a 1/3 cup and a half a cup. So it's great. It's great to have both butters, but if you only want to use unsalted butter, that's totally okay. In this case, there's lots of flavor coming from the filling as well. So we are adding a bit of salt to the flour. So even if you use unsalted butter, it will be totally fine. Okay. Do you think that that helps, Tracie? Is that a good butter chat, or should we go
I
deeper?
do. And you know what? So I'm going to share something. I do a lot of baking and I always got it the other way around. So I've always used unsalted butter unless for some reason it calls for salted. And I'm suddenly questioning all my baking choices and wondering if they would have turned out better had I used salted butter. But so far so good because I always add a pinch of salt, even because it does bring out that. I am going to answer one more question before we get going with the actual dough. So questions that are coming in are, well, what happens if I take the nuts out? What happens to the nutrient breakdown? Yes, the nutrient breakdown that we gave you per serving is exactly in what the recipe is. So the nuts do have protein, they do have calcium, they do have magnesium. If you were to take them out or switch them, it would change it. The same thing with the dried fruit, the same thing with the molasses, because it does have calcium. But this is where use the nutrient calculator. I can't stress it enough. Just figure out what it is that you want to take out and what you want to replace it with. But the other thing is, it's just one thing you're going to eat in a day. So you just kind of have to figure out, as we always say, it's like your whole day, your whole week. What did you eat? Where do you need to make it up? It's not about being so rigid that this is like a lot of work and it's stressful because we don't want to do that. So I would just say figure out what works for you and then just make adjustments accordingly to get what you need. One meal's not going to make or break you. Had to say it. We say it in every single demo.
That's I'm gonna get a shirt for Tracie that says
Yeah,
that.
sure. Yeah. Yeah, we're going to do that. It's not going to make or break you. Yeah. So it's really like we do this, and this is why we post the recipes, but we do these cooking demos because we do make the substitutions. We talk about dairy free, gluten free, all those other kinds of things. So you at the end of the day make choices that work for you.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's always good to talk about them. So, one of the reasons why I love doing cooking classes and webinars like this is because it is a forum to ask these questions. Because if you have those questions, other people have those questions. And oftentimes, even when I'm out in person chatting with people, these are the same questions that come
Yeah,
up. And so, sometimes, I try to cover it all, but it's great that everyone is interested in asking questions because I can't remember all the time. And so these questions always trigger, oh, yeah, but this. And there have been opportunities that Tracie and I in the past have taken all these ideas and then come forth and create these recipes for Osteoporosis Canada, which I think we're very lucky to be able to do that and have contribution from everybody that is here and
absolutely.
beyond.
And the last thing is the way that the recipe is laid out also is how it will taste, the texture, etc. If you are good with replacing sugar, I mean, every ingredient has a role in the recipe. If you want to switch it out, that's fine. It may just change the texture a bit, the taste a bit. And if you like it, that's what's important.
Hmm. Exactly, for sure. That
Okay, I'm gonna
totally
stop
is
listening
the
to my
case.
hoarse voice. Take it away, Emily. Off you go. This cough is
Okay.
killing me.
So I was going to do our flour, but I'm like, oh wait, we have to line our pan. That was like the first thing that I should have done. So this is just an 8-inch square. You could do this in a round. You could do it if you could double this recipe, by the way, if you wanted to, and do it in a 9 by 13. But we're doing an 8-inch or 9-inch square. So I have some parchment paper here, and you know, you've seen people do this a million times, and then they go and they'll like run it under water and squeeze it. I just do this. I make like a pinwheel cut on the corners. Okay. So you notice I'm turning it every time and then I have a different cut. And then typically what happens is you just kind of push this in and you get a nice lined pan. Okay. So it's not as you get your little corners here. Now, do you need to do this? Do you need to add parchment paper? No, you could just like put a little bit of oil on the pan. If you have a little extra butter, you can put butter in the pan. I just like doing this because then I can lift them out. You could do this with foil as well, and put a little bit of even cooking spray would work. Okay, so our pan is ready, which is perfect. Now we can get on with this dough, and I'm just going to take these out of the oven and just close your eyes, pretend like you can't see what I'm doing. Well, I guess you can't because I'm down here. So, but you can still hear me. That's what's important. Okay, so these are just going to be back here and I'll come get them later. All right, so into our flour. So yes, I am using all-purpose flour. Question number one, can it be gluten-free? 100%. I use gluten-free one-to-one flour. So that has the inclusion of xanthan gum for a nice texture. There's lots of great brands out there. So I always recommend if you find one that you like, and then you can start incorporating into the recipes that you like. Sometimes you'll need a little less, sometimes you'll need a little bit more, but I find that in recipes that are like this, like quick breads or not yeasted doughs, but chemical leaveners, which is what I'm adding, my baking powder. They work really well with those one-to-one gluten-free flours. If you have a special little mix that you like of a gluten-free flour, some people like to mix different flours together and create their own. That's where this kind of recipe is great because we're going to be introducing the milk to it. And so you can kind of hold back because you're going to be feeling the texture of the dough. Okay. So as I'm kind of whisking away here, I'm adding my spices, which are the cloves, ginger, and that little bit of salt and baking powder. Okay. So that is our dry mixture. So what I'm going to do to that is add my butter. So this is that diced up butter. You'll notice I didn't go get it out of the refrigerator. It's been sitting here the whole time so that I can just kind of add it and start working it in. Now, if you don't want to use your hands, remember what I said. You could use a pastry blender. Okay, so that's that. I'll show it to you because I know sometimes I say that and not everybody knows what I'm talking about. This is a pastry blender. Okay, sometimes will have sharper edges on it, and you just kind of work your way so that the butter breaks down. But I'm going to use my hands in here and then basically just rub the butter and flour together. So this is going to help to create similar size pieces in the dough. And so it's almost like a little bit of me time, relax time. So if the butter was really, really hard, I'd have to work really, really hard to kind of rub the butter and flour mixture. So here, this is seriously, it's a little bit relaxing. I'm not going to lie. Not that I'm going to fall asleep or anything, because that would be really embarrassing. But you just want to get similar size pieces of butter. So oftentimes in recipes, you'll see pea-sized pieces or oatmeal-sized pieces. This case, just try to have them about the same size. Not the big diced pieces that you put in, but a little bit smaller so that you'll get a nice even texture of the dough. Okay. So this, with the temperature of the butter, will happen a little bit quicker if it is at room temperature. If it's colder, it will take a little bit longer, okay? So if I was doing this in the food processor, the flour mixture with the spices would go in. I'd give it a few pulses, add my diced butter, and then just pulse it a few times again till I start to see that the butter pieces are similar sizes, okay? There we go. And I think I'm there. So I have my milk that I'm going to be using, and it's about 2/3 cup. So again, we go back to the butter discussion of having it dairy-free, this is where you could introduce a dairy-free beverage. Okay, so soy, if you are okay using almond or cashew milk, okay. Try to look for those that are fortified so that you do get a similar nutrient profile for it. Okay, so my hands will be a little bit floury here. I'm going to drizzle in my milk and I have a fork. So I'm not dumping all of the milk in. And especially if you're using gluten-free flour, I always recommend that you just do a little bit at a time. And so I want to make sure that my milk is getting all the dry pieces in here. Okay. And typically, I do tend to need all 2/3 cup of milk. Now, flours do vary. So if you're using, let's say, a locally milled flour, it might be a little different than a commercially milled flour. So that's why drizzling in a little bit at a time really helps. So I have a few dry spots there. I'm going to just get in there. And what you're looking for, this is where I love doing in-person cooking classes because then I could say, come and feel the dough. But what you're looking for is a nice kind of soft dough, not too sticky. So you can basically kind of gather the dough and you'll see that I have some dry bits here. Okay. So I'm just going to knead that into the dough a little bit. And if there's too much of that dry flour down at the bottom, that's where you're going to add just a few little drops of milk to bring it together. Okay. I actually think that there was a smidge too much milk in this cup, but that's okay. I'll just save it because we need some milk for the icing as well. All right, so there you go. Now, did you notice that I didn't worry about that? I wasn't too fussy. I just kind of went in there and started kneading the dough. That's what I want you to do too. I just want you to relax about the dough. So we have this dough that, see, it's not really sticky. I have a few bits stuck to me, but it's not really a sticky dough. I don't know if you can tell if I bring it up here, Roy, I don't know if they'll be able to see the texture of the dough. Okay. But when I poke on it, it doesn't stick to my finger, which is really important. Okay. So now we can roll it out. So I'm going to grab a little bit of extra flour on my board here. And I'd like to kind of try to start out with a square. That tends to help. So flip it over, get it floured. I'm going to try to start out as best I can with a square and use my rolling pin. We're looking for about a 14-inch square. Now, for those of you that don't have rulers in your kitchen, that's okay. Um, you can go to the garage and grab a tape measure. Or you can have something that you know is a certain length. And I always tell people, if you get the opportunity, measure the distance of your thumb to your pinky. Okay, so see how I'm holding my hand like this? Spread it out as much as you can and measure this distance. My distance is about 8 inches. Okay, so you'll always have a ruler at the end of your hand or arm, I guess, your hand to measure things. So you can see that the dough is really easy to flip and move around because I did add a little bit of more flour as I'm rolling it. And I'm trying to get a 14-inch square. Now, if it's only 12 inches, that's okay. Your buns will just be a little bit thicker. Okay. And if it's not a perfect square, that's okay too. I always like to say that it's quite all right if you don't get perfect corners. Now, if you were building something, that'd be a little bit different. You might want those perfect corners to come through. All right, do we think this might be 14 inches? So there's my 8 inches. And if I flip this over, it's actually a little bit big. Should kind of shrink it a little. There we go. And if we want to make sure, there's my kitchen ruler. So there's 12 inches. And then if I go over here, we're a couple more inches, and I'm only 12 inches that way, so I can roll it back out a little bit here. Okay, there. So there's our big pastry square. And then I'm going to take my sugar and butter mixture and spread it over. Now, for those of you that have ever made cinnamon buns, this may start to look familiar to you, but what may look a little different is the amount that I'm using. Okay. Oftentimes when you make cinnamon buns, the butter sugar mixture can be almost double or triple this. So we are using kind of a minimal amount because we're going to get all that flavor from the fruit and nuts and the spices that we're using. So get to the edges here as best you can. Okay. There we go. Get every little bit. That's what's great about rubber spatulas. There we are. And then our fruit mixture goes on. Okay. So you can sprinkle that all over. And try to get it as even as you can. It's okay if there's a few nuggets that are a little bit larger. Okay, go right to the edges again. Get all those spices. And then what I like to do to make sure that this is going to not go anywhere is just kind of gently press it in to our filling. Okay. And what's great about doing a filling like this is that every bite will be different. There. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to start closest to me, and I'm just going to roll this up. So I'm starting with the edge. Okay, get that in, and then just roll it up, jelly roll style. There we go, like that. And then I'm leaving it seam side down, just like so. Okay, now I'm going to get my pan over here because that's what we need to put our buns in. Now, of all things, I'm asking you to cut it into 9 pieces. Isn't that crazy? You could cut it into 12 if you'd like. You get much smaller ones, so the baking time will be different. But we're going to do 9 because it's a nice size and it's a little bit of a special snack for us. So 9, I'm going to go, this would be half. So I'm going to scooch over just a little bit more and cut this side into 4. So half again, and then half and half. So there's my 4. Okay. And I'm using a serrated knife because I have to cut through that fruit and nut mixture. So then I'm going to do, that's my 5th one. And then I'm going to do the same thing here, except now I'm cutting this one into 4. Not quite even, but that's okay. You guys are going to do a great job at home. And then what I like to do is, this is the reason why I like 9, is because you can do 3. Now, you'll notice that I'm also going to change up where I'm putting them so that not all the little ones, like the end bits, are going to be together. They're going to be opposite. And you will have space in here to do all 9, just like that. Okay. So guess what? This is a make-ahead right here. You can wrap these up, tuck them in the refrigerator overnight, and bake them tomorrow. Or you can wrap them up, overwrap them, or stick them in a Ziploc bag or airtight container, pop them in the freezer, and wait till Christmas morning to bake them. If you are going to do a freeze, what you want to do is take them out the night before and let them thaw in the refrigerator before you bake them. So it's a fabulous thing to have on hand that you can, or if you want to bake for tonight and tuck the rest in the freezer, you can totally do that as well. Okay. And if you don't want to bake them in the pan, you can make them a little bit smaller. Like I said, cut them into 12 and put them into muffin tins. And you can do them that way too. So you can share the wealth a little bit more and make a few more of these fruited holiday buns. Okay. So that was a lot in a short amount of time. But do we have any questions about any of that, Tracie?
Well, did that just not look impressive or what? That when you put that all together, all those buns, that looked impressive. I will say this, I think sometimes when we get questions, and we were kind of surprised. We didn't do baking for a long time when we started this program. And then people started emailing or in the surveys that you get after see we read them. People were like, well, I'd like some baking ideas. You have to be confident when you roll it because some people are worried, like, oh, what's going to happen? It's just dough. Don't be afraid of the dough. If you mess it up, you can smush it back together. Right, Emily? You're laughing, but how many baking mishaps have we had? And then if you cut it, it's not exactly you just kind of smush it back together. So that's pretty good. Um, People are saying they like the extra tips all the way along, and that's why we're doing this. Because you would already be done at home, but with Emily and I chatting, takes a little bit longer.
It
Takes a
does
little bit
take a little
longer.
bit longer. It does, 100%.
Oh, I'm gonna cough. I'm gonna give it back to Emily.
Okay. So if you decide, are you baking them tonight, tomorrow, a few weeks from now, um, you're going to need a 375-degree oven, nice and hot. Okay. And so we are going to, okay, I don't know if you guys can hear this, but my dog is driving me nuts. So this is real life. I'm at home. I got to let the dog out, guys. So here we go. There he is. Now he's happy. Okay,
Are you good, Emily? I came
I
on
am good.
lozenge.
Yep. Yeah, no, it's good. Lincoln wanted to go out. So none of you will ever see Lincoln because he's a Yorkie and he's like way down
He's
here. So,
little.
but he can be a little bit annoying.
Go ahead.
So 375. And if you are doing them the same method that I showed you tonight, it'll take anywhere. I start checking them about 25 minutes just because you never know whose oven. And then it usually takes closer to 35, sometimes 40 minutes. You're looking for a nice golden brown color. And I can show you what I baked now because that's what I was baking down here. And they fill the pan beautifully. So I don't know, Roy, if you want to do an overhead and show them. They do fill the pan quite nicely. And if you looked at the photo, they're pretty much exactly the same. If you were checking out the recipe before we got started, it doesn't really change much. It is what it is. And so these are delicious like this and warm, fabulous. But we're also going to do a molasses drizzle. And this is so that we can tell you about molasses because molasses is like so great. I still remember when Tracie's like, we have to do something with molasses because there's so much calcium in it. And I was like, what? This is crazy. And so we're using molasses. The other reason why we're using molasses is because this really changes the kind of overall feel of these buns. It really kind of brings in a little bit of a gingerbread feel because if you notice the spices that I used, if you combine it with molasses, you might be thinking gingerbread. And that's kind of the inspiration that kind of brought this all together. And this is not really sweet. It has a little bit of spice to it, which I think works really well with the fruit and nut filling. And that's what we're going to make. We're going to make our molasses ginger drizzle. So if you're not a ginger fan, you did add some ginger here already, so you might not have added that. And you don't have to add it to our drizzle. But let me tell you, it's got such a spicy little kick. It's quite lovely. So I'm going to add my ground ginger to my icing sugar. Okay. And we're going to add a tablespoon of molasses. And this also makes a great color to our drizzle. Okay. It just gives us a nice deep earthy color to it. So there's our rich and decadent molasses. And I'm using fancy molasses because it tends to have that more palatable sweet flavor to it, where cooking or blackstrap molasses is a little bit more pungent. So not everybody's a fan of it when they are using it for baking. Okay. But it does have, you can use it interchangeably in this recipe because it's a tablespoon. And then what we're going to do is add just a little smidge. I guess that's why I needed this little bit of milk. A couple teaspoons of milk. Now, if you've made icing sugar drizzles, you know that you only need a little bit to get a drizzle. So really kind of hold back. Don't try to add it all at once because you really do want to have that drizzle effect with the molasses drizzle as opposed to really, really something very thin because it won't sit on top of the bun. So you can see here, I'm gradually adding my milk. I might need just a smidge more. There, that might be perfect. Now, if you want to, you can actually put this on while they're warm and it kind of seeps right in. But I like when you let it cool a little bit and then add it. So it has this beautiful kind of toffee color to it, which is absolutely lovely. And so this is the consistency as I'm letting the whisk come up. I don't know, I'll come closer so you can kind of see this, but it's leaving ribbons behind. So see how it kind of just sits on top? That's the perfect texture for this drizzle. You really want to have that nice little bit of texture to it. Now you can do many things here. By the way, another make ahead, bake your buns. That sounds silly. Bake your buns. Bake your fruited buns. Let them cool completely and then wrap them, tuck them away in the freezer. If it's only for you and a friend and you want to freeze the rest, keep two, freeze them or freeze them individually so you can take one to work. Or if you're going to meet a friend at the park, take a couple with you and enjoy them and then tuck them away in the fridge or freezer, whatever works for you. They also warm up really nicely in the oven, just on a nice low oven to warm them through or pop them in the microwave. If you want to serve them all at once and you're just like, you know what? I got to just put the icing on everything, the drizzle on everything, you can totally do that. And that parchment paper will really help because you can just kind of lift it up right out of it, okay, like this. And you can transfer this onto a plate or a platter, serving platter if you want. Okay, I'm just going to put them here like that. Or you can let everybody drizzle them their own bun. So you can put this with a nice little spoon or fork and have everybody drizzle their own because some people like a little bit more drizzle than others. I'm going to drizzle this all just like that. I went a little heavy on that side because I do like my drizzle. I'll go lighter on this side. There we go. What do you think, Tracie? Little cup of tea, little cup of coffee,
I
espresso.
think that the two that have the most drizzle are one is for you and one is for me. That's what I think. They look pretty good. And you know what? Thank you to everyone for all your lovely comments. And someone it was a very it made me laugh. She goes, "You're both so reassuring." When we give you we're trying, and that you love the cooking classes and the chatting is all very helpful. And Cheryl actually said that she's made the cinnamon vanilla tea latte recipe that
Oh.
she would sip while she would be making these. It's on the website. Feel free to do that. Everyone's like, they look so delicious. And so we did talk a little bit. I know Emily's going to do the hard job. She's got such a challenging job. She's going to taste it now. Yeah, so she's going to do that. But we did want to talk about the molasses because we do get questions on blackstrap versus fancy. There's even one I've seen not frequently called cooking
Mhm.
molasses. How is it, Emily?
It's terrible. Nobody wants any. If
Nobody
any, if any of you are around the corner, it's still warm.
is still warm. And I will say this. So Emily and I actually had an in-person event earlier this week, and she made the winter fruit and nut cake that we did last year. And it was very tasty. I just have to tell you, I got to taste that day because we were both together. So
Tracie, we have to let Roy do an overhead here because I just want to
yes.
show
Oh,
everybody.
Roy, you got to do the pull.
So
Yes.
that's what all the goodness
Yum.
inside is, guys. Like that's all the
Mm.
fruit and nut. So it really it's a surprise in every bite.
Yeah.
And that little bit of molasses drizzle is quite yummy. We were
And
talking about molasses, weren't we, Tracie?
yes, and also just so you know, Roy's our web manager and he's the one in the back, and we'll give him one too whenever we do this. So it's not just for me and Emily. But the thing with the molasses is we were shocked. Like we would go through all the foods, and when we found like how much calcium molasses has, the joke I made last year was it's not an excuse to sit and eat gingerbread every day. So, but I just found I was so fascinated by the quantity in such a small amount of calcium. So there is that. Somebody mentioned earlier this week in that other class that we did that it's actually an ingredient that people used to use many years ago in cooking in general. So I think we've kind of just used it in gingerbread, really, unless other people use it. So you can use it in other things. Maybe we will too.
You can totally. I don't know if you've ever had baked beans with molasses, but they're delicious.
I
Like
was
it's
just
just that
reminded, yes,
yeah, it just has that nice balance of acidity and sweetness,
yes.
which is lovely. And I think that's why it works here. Sorry, I'm talking with my mouth full, but
You
they're
go
very
right
yummy.
ahead.
Um, and it works really nicely here because it almost cuts the sweetness, especially with the ginger in there from the dried fruit. And I think that sometimes when we think of, sweet treats or desserts, that they can be overwhelming and
Yeah,
sweet. So this is really
that
meant to
plainly
be
sweet, and that's not what
exactly.
this is.
No, not at all.
No, no.
No.
And somebody, I'm just looking here. Yes, I will do the apron. Thank you for reminding me. Good job.
Good reminder.
It takes a village, right? So it's all together. But we did talk about the molasses. We talked about a sugar substitute earlier on. We did, right?
We did.
Okay, good. We
I
talked
think
about
we did.
gluten-free. I thought we did. Would you like to repeat it just in case somebody, because part of me, I thought we did. If somebody,
So,
instead of the golden sugar.
Oh, the golden sugar. I talked about brown sugar, but if you need to use an actual sugar substitute, oftentimes I will use slightly less of a sugar substitute. So this is only a third cup of brown sugar. So you might actually be able to get away with a quarter cup. I find sugar substitutes quite sweet. So you might be okay with just a
Yeah.
quarter cup in there.
Again, sometimes I will say make the recipe once as it's actually written out. Because then, if you can't, obviously don't. Because then you'll get an idea of what it should taste like. And then if you want to start switching up the quantity of sugar or use a different flour, etc., or change the fruit, then at least you have kind of an idea. I think we can attest it all looks delicious. Keep these sessions coming. That is the goal. That is the goal. And the type of molasses Emily used is fancy,
Hmm.
not blackstrap, but you
No,
could. It's just got
you
a
could.
more pronounced
Hmm. It's
flavor.
just a little bit stronger and it's not quite as balanced as in this case as the fancy molasses. Cooking molasses, a little bit closer to the fancy molasses side. So it does have a little bit more of a balanced sweetness to it.
Yes. And I'm just checking. Oh, there was another question. So when you see milk in a recipe, is it so if it just says milk, is it always 2%?
Typically, but you can go as low as in this recipe, you could use a skim or a 1%, or on the opposite side, you could go rich and use a whole milk or even a light cream would work here. So if all you had is coffee cream in the fridge, you could use it. If you're using something a little bit higher in fat, like 18% or 35% cream, you'll actually need less just because of the amount of fat. So you might only need about half a cup or less of the heavier creams.
I am going to say this about, saying you can use, coffee cream or homogenized, things are expensive. So if you are looking to make a couple of things and one's calling for, 2% and another one's calling for cream, I've often looked in my fridge and thought, I don't want to buy another one. So if I have like 5% coffee cream, that's what I use. And then I adjust on that. So
And
that's
then
just,
and then Tracy calls me to make sure that that's okay.
and then I go, what did I do? Is it going to be okay? I actually, yeah, I have another question. We'll talk about that later though, because I got to start my baking pretty soon. All right. So everyone, it is late. We are going to send out a survey. It really would be helpful if you could fill it out and even tell us, like, do you like the later time? It's actually not a question. We should have put it on. We typically do midday or around mid-afternoon, depending on where you are in the country. But before we go on, and as Emily, I'm just going to let you, it'd be good as a cup of tea right now or
Hmm.
an espresso
Hmm.
or there we go. All right. So the winner of the apron, congratulations, Sandra Watts from Port Hood, Nova Scotia.
Ooh,
I'm going to email
congrats.
you and we're going to send that out. So congrats on that. And I am going to share because there's some stuff I do want to share with you before we go. So, over the break, if you have time, we have lots of stuff on the website. It's a great time to catch up on webinars, podcasts, download the nutrient calculator. And if you would like to, we also welcome an end of year donation. You can make it easily online. It helps with programs like the Cook with OC program and supporting all of our other services. And we definitely appreciate any and all donations with that. Osteoporosis.ca, it's all on the homepage. And thank you. We have had such a fabulous year. We wish each and every one of you a wonderful holiday season and a sweet, warm, and healthy new year. Emily, thank you as always for a wonderful year of cooking and baking, talking food and strategies. We have lots coming up for next year. So if you're not, make sure you subscribe. Roy, thank you in the back end. I know nobody ever sees Roy, he's doing all the other stuff. But thank you all. See you in 2026. Take care, everyone. Bye
Bye,
bye.
everybody. Happy holidays.
Happy holidays.